we go. Hopefully now the audience and everyone is now seeing the beginning of our presentation. Thank you.
Yeah.
That would be the first thing not to do. We're also beginning by that. And on that note, then we can jump in and go ahead and get started, just because I know we have a lot to get through today. Candace, you let me know that you've prepared a lot of material to share. So I want to make sure we have time for all of that and for people to ask questions as well. So welcome to How to Plan the Best Virtual Event for Your Nonprofit. My name is Emily Friedrichs, and I'm joining everyone today from Elevation. We're a full-service digital agency dedicated to helping nonprofits increase their impact. So we work with many different nonprofits. We about 200 a year in terms of supporting them with web and graphic design, website support, branding, SEO, and social media, and exclusively with nonprofits. So we've had the opportunity to partner with a lot of great organizations and see kind of different things that they're up to and experiencing. A little bit more about me. I am the Communications and Partnerships Marketing Manager. And I'm really interested in community building and also behavioral psychology. And that's sort of some of my past. I studied political anthropology, political and economic anthropology in college, and did quite a bit of work in community organizations. And so now I'm really excited to be connecting some of that past work with my current role. And I am also myself a nonprofit board member now. So it's great to be able to see and work with nonprofits on kind of both ends in terms of the digital services that Elevation provides, and then also on the other side of the inner workings of a nonprofit. And I, of course, am not the virtual events expert here today. We are very lucky to be joined today by Candace Cody. And Candace is the manager of content education at CauseVox. CauseVox supports nonprofits and partners with them around digital fundraising. And she's worked with nonprofits for over 6 years at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Candace, and we're going to get started.
Thanks, Emily. Really excited to be here, and thanks everyone for joining so far, and already such great activity in the chat. Keep it coming. So yeah, a little more about me. Yeah, I've spent the last 6 years helping nonprofits get up and running with digital fundraising. So it's always a joy to work with nonprofits, especially as this last year where there's been this huge shift to digital and virtual. So lots of insights to share with, really how you can run a virtual event. So Emily, whenever you're ready, I can get started sharing my screen as well.
Perfect. I should believe it has switched over now.
So, all right. So enough about me. So let's go ahead. A little bit more about CauseVox though. So CauseVox, where I work, is a digital fundraising platform that really helps you run any type of virtual fundraising need. So you can also do just donation pages. We have ticketing now, so event ticketing, crowdfunding, peer-to-peer fundraising, which is a lot of how people run virtual events is through the peer-to-peer fundraising software. So our donation forms are really easy to use. Takes about 15 seconds for a donor to complete a donation. We've tried to streamline that, all mobile optimized. We have crowdfunding, so a lot of people will use us for Giving Tuesday or other like short-term fundraisers. We have peer-to-peer, and so that's really how you can activate your community to fundraise on your behalf. And a lot of where virtual fundraising gets used on the peer-to-peer templates. And then, which was actually just launched yesterday, very exciting for us. We just launched event ticketing so that if you are selling tickets for your virtual fundraising event, you can use us, sell those tickets, and have everything all in one place on our platform. So yeah, so many different uses throughout the year that you can use CauseVox for. So pretty much any idea that you have, you can definitely use CauseVox to fundraise for it. So let's dive into the contents of our webinar. So thank you again for joining us for how to plan the best virtual event for your nonprofit. For our agenda today, we're going to do a brief introduction to virtual events. Then we're going to talk in a lot of detail actually about how to create your virtual event plan. Then we're going to be talking a little bit about choosing the right tools to meet your virtual event needs and engaging and empowering your participants, especially peer-to-peer fundraisers, if you do go that route. And then just kind of wrapping it up with some quick best practices and a Q&A. So any questions that you have, feel free to send those in. There's the Q&A pane. I'm sure we'll keep an eye on that. And then also feel free to send things in the chat as well. So I'll try to get to as many questions as possible. Okay, let's talk a little bit about really virtual events and how we got here. So of course, with the pandemic, a lot of nonprofits are having to deal with smaller budgets. A lot of the organizations that I chat with are having to run these types of virtual events with a smaller budget than they usually would for their in-person events. There's also, of course, changes in staff that have unfortunately occurred because of tightening budgets. So that's been a struggle that I've heard a lot of nonprofits chat about. And you've also had to reimagine all your programs and your ways of working. So I think probably most of you are, I'm working from home right now. So completely different way of working than what we had previously. And now a lot of your programs, I would think, would have to be moved online as much as possible, or, setting up new guidelines and social distancing orders. So that's been another challenge in the last year. And of course, the reason why we're all here today is that your in-person fundraising events are still canceled, unfortunately. And so there's been this rapid transition to virtual fundraising, which happened like basically overnight. But there hasn't always been a clear path of how you can really run an effective virtual fundraiser for your organization. You've just had to do it. You just got thrown into it. So hopefully we'll help with that today. And then the unfortunate thing is that we still don't know exactly how long this is going to go on. There's the vaccine rollouts, and that's going well so far, but there's still not an exact timeline for when you can do in-person events. And so a lot of the organizations that I work with, they're still contemplating in-person events later this year. And so I always caution and say, I would recommend planning like a hybrid and doing virtual first is the first option. And then if you're able to do in person alongside that, great. But at the end of the day, even later this year, there's still going to be a lot of people in your audience that might not be comfortable as well. Even if there's like the all clear to do in-person events, virtual fundraising is going to be around for quite a while. So, and is a really key thing to look into, not just like this year, but even next year too. I think virtual fundraising isn't really going anywhere. So all of this.
I just want to add into that, Candace, because that's a discussion we've had recently. And I think sometimes we forget that even though vaccine rollout is going so well, there are still segments of populations that are unable to get the vaccine, even though they maybe would, wish that they were able to. So there are a number of people who, for medical reasons, can't get the vaccine, or considering that it's still not approved yet for children, or there's some questions about pregnant women. So keeping in mind that even though all age groups are now eligible for the vaccine, there still may be some hiccups in terms of really returning to in-person activities. And I just wanted to kind of remind people of that, because that's a conversation I've had recently, or in that sense. So I think it's great that you brought that up and just kind of reminded people to think about both.
Yeah. I mean, I think you do always have to, even when we get the all clear, there's just going to be still, vulnerable populations and people that aren't going to feel comfortable at in-person gatherings. So I think we're going to end up seeing right now virtual first, but even later this year and into next year, there's definitely going to be more of like that hybrid approach. So this is kind of like the new normal, if you will, of virtual fundraising. I know we hate that phrase, but so all of this to say that there's been this massive trend from in-person fundraising, and so marketing and fundraising is very quickly becoming one and the same because everything is taking place online. And so really the most successful virtual events are also the best marketed virtual events typically. So a lot of these practices, best practices for fundraising are also, of course, best practices for marketing as well, your event. So as a whole, I do have good news for you. Total online revenue grew by 10% last year. So more people are giving online and engaging online with organizations than ever. So that's a huge jump too, because there was, I think it was a 23% increase in the 2 years prior. So online is, online revenue is growing tremendously. And then also in 2019, mobile giving grew by 21%. So I couldn't find the stats from last year yet. I don't think they've been released, but I would also assume that there's going to be at least a 10% increase in this, if not more, as more and more people are interacting on their phones and giving that way. So all of this kind of ties back to what we call the digital fundraising cycle. So especially for your events, but also really any type of digital fundraising that you do, there's kind of 3 steps. So there's the steps of, overall attracting more people to your organization. So using search engine optimization to drive more traffic to your website, getting more emails, people leaving their emails so that they can stay in touch with you, also on social media and digital advertising as well. And then you want to, once you have all of those people that have expressed interest in your organization, you really do want to nurture them. So educating them more about your organization, what you're doing, how they can get involved, and then hopefully converting those leads, if you will, or potential donors into actual donors so that you can convert them. So whether it's, through just your donation form on your website or running a virtual event, virtual events really do help along the conversion process of those who have already expressed interest in your organization. And then, of course, the trick is to retain them and continue to nurture your existing donors and, continue to get them to give in the future. What we have seen is that the nonprofits that will withstand the pandemic the best are the ones that are the quickest to adopt a really comprehensive digital fundraising strategy and implementing these sort of digital best practices. And then a little bit more about virtual fundraising. So Wild Apricot did a survey, I think it was 1,000 organizations, and half said that they had either already run a virtual event or were planning on running one in 2020. I think even your responses kind of back this up, where about half of you have and half of you haven't. And then, let's talk a little bit more about just what is a virtual event fundraiser to begin with. So a virtual event takes place online instead of gathering together in person. You can run your fundraising event online. So this usually incorporates elements of live streaming, video, social media engagement, usually a fundraising platform, and more to create your event experience. Virtual events actually aren't new. They've been around for a while, but of course, they're rapidly growing. So I know we're all kind of bummed out we can't do our in-person events that we always do every year, but there's been a lot of advantages to virtual events that organizations have seen. So typically there's a lot lower event costs. So you're not having to deal with paying for a location, renting tables, working with, all of those typical things that tend to add up at those in-person events. And because of that, a lot of organizations are seeing a much higher return on investment. So they're taking away more funds than ever before. And there's also typically less administrative tasks because now, without all of the extra steps of planning and figuring out food and all of that, you can focus all of your time on actually your fundraising strategy and helping that grow online. Typically, there's a wider range of participants and supporters. With any in-person event, you're pretty much limited to people who are already in the area and willing to go. While virtual, you can really get attendees and supporters from anywhere. So you do tend to end up with a lot more people attending or participating. And so it's just also in general like an easy and engaging participation opportunity where people can, yeah, of course, kind of participate from their homes. And a lot of people are looking for things to do now still. So ultimately, all of these add up to quite a few advantages for your organization so that you end up taking home more funds with less effort. And so we typically see this here at CauseVox, where a lot of those in-person events cost usually in between $30 and $50 to raise 100, while digitally and here on CauseVox, we see that it costs typically about $3 to raise $100. So there's a few moving pieces to a typical virtual event. Of course, this depends on the type of event that you're running, and there's variations of this that I see, but usually I see with virtual events, there's an online fundraising campaign. So a way for people to read content, engage with your media, track fundraising progress, and donate all on one page. Usually there's peer-to-peer fundraising. I think I'll talk about this a little bit more later on. Sometimes there's ticket sales and or auctions. I've seen like raffles be more popular than auctions recently. I think it's a little bit easier to run online. There's also event sponsorships. One of the things is like that I hear some organizations ask me about is, can I even do sponsors? How do I fulfill sponsors for virtual events? And the answer is yes, you can definitely do sponsors. And I'll get into some tips about that in a moment. And then there's usually a live streaming component. Not always, you don't have to, but live streaming has been a huge part of virtual fundraising events. One thing I want to keep in mind when you're planning your virtual fundraiser is that by and large, the vast majority of funds raised for your virtual gala, walkathon, whatever you're doing, are typically raised ahead of time. So ahead of your live stream, ahead of your end date. So that's like the biggest difference from in-person events, where usually in person, you're getting a lot of funds coming in that night. Usually with virtual fundraising events, everything's raised over the course of, I usually see about 4 to 6 weeks ahead of your live stream or, whatever your end date is for your virtual event. And so in that way, you're not necessarily relying on your live stream or that end date to bring in all the funds at once, but you're raising funds over a period of time. And that's actually a nice way to do it too, because then your live stream is celebrating your success and you really know where you are in your progress ahead of time. So I have a case study that we saw from Summit Assistance Dogs last May. They very quickly transitioned their in-person luncheon to a virtual one. They set a goal of $175,000 and they blew past that, which was very exciting. And so we asked them about, how their event went and what they saw. And they were able to, so typically people would purchase a table at their in-person event. And instead, they asked each person who typically would purchase a table for $10,000 to instead sign up and fundraise for the organization $10,000. So because of the virtual component, they were able to engage more virtual table captains to fundraise than their in-person events. They also spent $50,000 less in event costs, and as a result, took home over $35,000 more. So as a result of all of this, their return on investment increased 8 times. So they actually just spun up their event for this year. I actually have a couple of screenshots later on, but I just wanted you to see sort of the framework for this. So they have their live stream embedded on the page. They directed people to donate right here so they can watch and donate on the same page. They had a lot of great content. They had a matching grant in place. They had people, they were directing them to actually watch on their YouTube channel as well for the live event. They also had event sponsors listed. And then there are those virtual table captains that I mentioned. So they got all of these people to sign up to and challenge them to raise $10,000 in lieu of their $10,000 gift at the event. And this way they could easily share this across different channels, email, social media, and ask friends and family to give, and then also ask friends and family to watch the live stream as well. Um, Also very popular these days is virtual walkathons. So I would say that actually on CauseVox, I probably see even more virtual walkathons than virtual galas. Similarly, they saw more engagement than ever for the participants for their walkathon. They had a 2-week challenge where they engaged teams of 4 to walk 455 miles total together on their own, completely socially distanced. They did have a live stream at the end to kind of celebrate the end of their virtual event. They did engage a bunch of sponsors. And what was very exciting for them is that they didn't know how this was going to translate virtually. So they set a pretty small goal that they thought was optimistic still at the time of $15,000. And then they raised more than twice of what they expected, and actually raised more than their in-person event. And again, cut out a lot of those event costs. So I just wanted to show you this example as well. They just have so many great parts of their page. You're going to get all of these slides. So if you want to go back and take a look at any of these examples in detail, I highly recommend it, just because they're just such great examples of these types of virtual events. So one of the things that I see across the board, and that you saw with these 2 examples, is that they are using peer-to-peer fundraising with their virtual events. And so what we've seen across the board is that when you use peer-to-peer fundraising, you tend to raise about twice as much. And so that is because your virtual event is getting outside of your existing networks and reaching the networks of your supporters. So you're exponentially increasing the reach of your event, and yeah, able to engage new donors at a time that is kind of weird to engage new donors, right? So it's a great opportunity. So it's really never been a better time to explore peer-to-peer fundraising. Again, it's really just drawing on the relationships of your community. It's also an alternate ask. So kind of like Summit Assistance Dogs, maybe not all of the people who typically donate $10,000 were able to last year, but they asked everyone to instead fundraise. And so for those who might not be able to give the same gifts that they used to, it's a great opportunity to still really leverage their networks and actually bring in a lot more new donors. And of course, it's like ideal for digital fundraising. So it's kind of so easy for people to sign up and fundraise for you. Okay, so all of that being said, let's talk about your virtual event and thinking through your goals and how you want to run it. So all of this to say that you want to always make sure that whatever event plans that you have, you want to make sure that your fundraising goals and just your goals in general are SMART. So specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time bound. I'm sure some of you are pretty familiar with this, but putting some specific goals to things really does help you track progress and stay on task. So the first thing that you want to set for your virtual fundraising event is actually your overall fundraising goal for across the board. So you might want to, if you are kind of translating an in-person event to the virtual space, you can, of course, set your fundraising goal based on how much you raise in that in-person event. Usually virtual events raise about the same from what I see. So I think, just working off of that previous goal works really well. Or if you haven't done a virtual event before, this is completely new. I also just really recommend going on like setting a goal based on how much you actually need to raise. So is there any kind of gap in your programming budget because you had to move everything virtually, or just thinking through, where are the gaps in your budget and how much you actually need to raise through this event? Because the better you can communicate that, the more likely you are to reach that goal. And kind of on that same note is to set an impact goal. So end of the day, you don't want to just think about your fundraising goals, but actually the impact that this virtual event is going to help create. So how many people are going to be benefited if you can break it down that way. You can also think about hours of services provided and any kind of other impact statements that you can make. So Summit Assistance Dog's new fundraiser for this year, I think they just do this really well where they have that goal. They raised 186,000 last year, so they bumped it up to 200,000 this year. So they have pretty specific goals on that end. Next up is if you are doing peer-to-peer fundraising, you want to think about your participants and how many people you actually want to get to fundraise for you. So setting a participant goal. And along those same lines, how much do you actually want each individual to raise? So if you're not sure, I would either go on what sounds approachable. So I know a lot of organizations start by challenging people to raise between $300 and $500 is pretty typical. But you can also do it kind of based on what your community is comfortable with. Summit Dogs had $10,000 as their suggested goal. So it really does depend on your audience. Another thing to think through is, kind of basing it on your overall goal and dividing by the number of people that you want to participate. And then you can always get the individual fundraising goal that way as well, just by breaking it down by how many people need to raise what in order to reach your overall goal. You can think through teams. I think teams are great, especially if you're engaging groups of people to fundraise together. It does kind of create more of a community experience as well. So just thinking through, are you having any groups of people that you want to engage that could work as a team? I see a lot of businesses have their own team fundraising page and all the individuals underneath it, churches and other just kind of groups that you might be engaging. And then also thinking through any awards or prizes that you'll be incorporating to incentivize your participants. I see this done often with these events where, they'll say, hey, if you reach your fundraising goal, you get a prize, or if you raise $50, you'll get an entry to potentially win a prize. So you don't have to make it, everyone wins, but some kind of incentive is always nice and kind of keeps people engaged. If you're doing an activity-based fundraiser, you do want to think about your challenge as well. So if you're doing a virtual walkathon, for example, do you want everyone walking on one day at a specific time, or can they do their own walk during the month leading up to the end of your campaign? Do you want them to set, are you challenging everyone to raise or walk a specific mile goal? So you can have people like Parkinson's Nebraska did as a team walk 455 miles total, which is the width of Nebraska, I think. Or do you want people to just challenge themselves to whatever goal works for them? And I've also seen a lot of like walk, run, rolls. So, do you specifically want people to walk or hike, or do you want people to, be able to kind of choose how they participate in your activity-based fundraiser? Next up is thinking about your timeline. So as I said, a lot of these virtual events, funds are raised ahead of time. So think through your start and end dates for your fundraising. I typically recommend starting fundraising about 6 weeks out from your event date. That actually usually includes like first 2 weeks just getting peer-to-peer fundraisers up and running, so that on day one of like promoting to your entire network, they're ready to go. And then 4 weeks of your fundraising push to your wider audience. That's what I see most often. You don't have to stick to that timeline. So you just want to think through what your timeline looks like for your event. And also just consider some setup time, giving yourself a few weeks ahead of time to actually set up your pages online and get everything up and running. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about sponsors and partners. So again, I really think that there's a huge opportunity to engage sponsors and partners for your virtual event. So are you seeking sponsorships? And if so, how much do you hope to bring in from these sponsorships? And what will fulfillment look like for you? So of course, in-person events have a different way that you honor your sponsors, but there's a lot of very practical ways that I'll get to in a moment that you can really fulfill those sponsorships. I do typically see, and this is not a hard and fast rule by any means, but Usually the virtual event sponsorships tend to be a little bit less than in-person event sponsorships, but you're also able to engage more because it's virtual. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're setting those goals. And also, you don't have to just ask for large donations from your sponsors or partners. You can also engage them to participate in your as a peer-to-peer fundraising. So if you know a business that might get their staff involved in fundraising for you, that's a great opportunity to partner. Or maybe you can get them to commit to a match up to a certain dollar amount for your virtual event. If you are doing any kind of food or drink components, maybe you can get them to donate food or drinks and have them mail it to everyone participating at home, or just simply engaging your sponsors or partners to promote the virtual event to their audience. So they're probably doing their own email communications and other social media communications. So if you can get them to leverage their if you can leverage their community to drive more people to participate in your virtual event, that's a huge win.
And on
So,
that
yeah.
topic, Candace, you mentioned the idea of sending food or drink, and I've seen some sort of very high-end examples of that, which included, a full bottle of wine. But I've also seen some use of very cost-effective ones. I was sharing this with Erin in the chat. For example, tea. Sending just a tea bag in the mail, obviously sealed and everything. But then you can share a cup of afternoon tea together for an event, and it's a way to kind of connect with some sort of physical sensation, which I think is more appealing to people, because by sharing that experience, it helps them to feel more connected. So there are creative ways to do this in kind of a cost-effective way as well, such as the afternoon tea idea. If a full bottle of wine is not in your budget, and of course the tea bag is something you can mail in a normal envelope size, so it has that advantage as well.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of really simple, practical ways that you can have some kind of, yeah, food, drink, even suggestions, too, like having them like give them, hey, we suggest that you make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and eat it at home. I actually saw that once. That sounds really silly, but that's like real. um, so kind of like circling back to, and thanks Emily for kind of suggesting that too. So circling back to sponsorships for a moment, there's a lot of ways that you can fulfill these sponsorships by having some logo placements on your fundraising site. I've seen a lot of virtual events actually have like little commercials that they offer their sponsors, just the opportunity to present their product for 30, 60 seconds in front of the audience for their live stream. There's also, numbers of shout outs, linked to sponsors in your emails, potentially having them even access the entire event attendee guest list so they can do their own follow-up email communications. I've seen team pages for sponsors so that like publicly it's really showing how much that they gave, as well as one fundraiser that I talked to said that they had this like specific like party happy hour after the virtual event for their sponsor, and so they did like a little bit extra time for their sponsor to just enjoy and hang out, basically. So could be some exclusive virtual events that you can even engage your sponsors in if they're attending. So here's just an example of logo placement on a fundraising site from Summit Assistance Dogs. And then this is the Parkinson's Nebraska's sponsorship levels. I think these are so great. I highly recommend that you come back and take a look at these levels if you want to do something similar for your organization. Let's talk about ticketing for a moment. And then, yeah, I do have food and drinks on here. So
I'll
yeah.
throw in an additional one on there. I saw that you showed the logos at the bottom, and one thing that people don't always think about is that not only the visual logos, but having a backlink is a huge value to different companies. So that adds an SEO value. So if you're willing to make that logo a followable backlink, then that can help that company, and you can talk about this with them, especially if they're a savvier company in terms of digital marketing. But there are great benefits to that, because if they're a local company looking for, people in a specific area, and you're, I don't know, a local YMCA, that's, you're going to have a lot of local folks coming to your site. That can be really valuable in terms of that company's digital advertising. So that can be a great kind of thing to point out to your potential sponsors, and also to include, is that make sure that that is the logo is actually a link as well, and it's a do follow backlink, and that adds additional value for them in a actually a more permanent basis, because even as long as that web page is live, it will continue to be helpful to the SEO for that company.
Yeah. I mean, it does add a lot of value. So any links back are really great. Yeah. Thanks, Emily. Thanks for jumping in there. Okay, so let's think about ticketing for just a moment. Are you going to be selling tickets? And then, if there's a lot of pros and cons to it. So it's great if you are doing any like food or drinks or have something that you're mailing to people, because that can offset event costs. But a con to selling tickets and making your virtual event ticketed is that it could deter participation. I kind of see sometimes there's a mix of both, where like if people want the thing that you're going to send to them, they can like buy the ticket for it or just watch and attend live. So you don't have to necessarily do one or the other. But it really does come down to like how many attendees you want day of. So the more, if you remove the barrier of having to purchase a ticket, you'll probably get some more attendees. But if you are going to be charging tickets, and thinking about that as a revenue stream of driving funds for your nonprofit, how much you hope to bring in from these tickets, and what will fulfillment look like if you are going to be kind of like gating your live stream, or thinking through some of those details of how to make it exclusive. So just a quick example of how you can have some different entry levels, exclusive happy hours, and thinking through, different types of levels for your participation, for your participants to join. And that's actually our new ticketing form, if anyone's interested. Okay, so food and drinks. So are you incorporating food and drinks? Again, like Emily was saying, it does have it has a different feels than just watching something online. If you are actually tasting something and at home and participating live, and everyone is having this cocktail at the same time, basically, it does have a different feel. So it does make your event more engaging, especially on your live stream, and has a little bit more of that in-person event feel. There's a few cons. It increases expenses. There's a little bit more planning, and could be some more complications involved in like making sure everyone gets it in time and all of that. So a couple recommendations, there's some cost-effective ones like Emily shared. You could always see if you do have a local sponsor that's willing to, send that bottle of wine for you, so you don't have to, take that expense and also the shipping process on them, on your terms, but have that kind of like offset to your partner or sponsor. Or I often see a lot of these events actually have like at-home recipes. And they'll email out a list of suggested ingredients that they have, and people can prepare that ahead of time, or even do like a live cocktail class session as incorporated into it. So I saw this done really well at this Brunch at Home campaign from the Autism Society of Minnesota. So they had a couple of different chefs come on, and then they had even a mixologist who apparently specializes in virtual cocktail classes and training. And so he led a part of it, and took 10 minutes to basically show everyone how to make the drink for the rest of the event, which I thought was really nice to incorporate that, and even showcasing him right on the page, right? And so he's getting his link back to his site too. All right, and then of course, last but not least, we're going to be talking about this for a little bit, is live streaming. So is this open to the public or exclusive? So again, if you're doing ticketing, it's probably going to be exclusive. or if you're requiring registration, that does change how you run the live stream event. Or are you just going to let anyone who stumbles upon the link watch? So just think through what your goals are for that, because if you do have registrations, then you get everyone's contact information. So there's some benefits to that, and then you can follow up with the attendees. So kind of tied into this is how many attendees do you actually want on your live stream, and maybe setting some goals for how many people you want to replay it after the fact. Are you going to do it pre-recorded, all live, or a mix of both? I see typically a mix of both. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but you can also think through some of the ways you actually plan to engage participants on that live stream. And also thinking through how you're going to fundraise through the live stream as well. So I have a few tips, is one of which is I do recommend using a mix of pre-recorded and live content together. Actual live content does make your event a little bit more engaging. You can say like, hey, Debbie, thanks for joining, and just even have those call outs to showcase, donors or people who are actually interacting with you live. So usually a live component is best practice, but also you can have it be partially pre-recorded, where maybe you have a certain presentation or a certain story that you can share as well. If your event is typically a whole day affair, very long, I would recommend having it broken up into shorter separate sessions that people can join and participate in, just because people's attentions are short, and they can then choose what they join. And you might want to consider creating a promo video for your event on top of your live stream. So just kind of thinking through what that might look like. 1 to 2 minutes is more than enough. And it can be really simple too. It doesn't have to be anything too flashy, but just even a few people talking about what the virtual event is going to actually entail. Great for marketing. And then you can also think through how you can integrate that on your pages and platforms and in your whole marketing and social media strategy. Summit Assistance Dogs, love them. This year, they actually are having 4 different virtual events showing different types of programs, and they have these really great engagement opportunities all leading up to their culmination event, which is a 30-minute pre-recorded program that they have on March 6th. So people can kind of come, choose what they want to engage with, and then kind of continue to push people to that longer program or that 30-minute program at the end. And you'll see that they have different ways that you can sign up and engage with it. So they have like registrations available, but they also have for their 30-minute program, I think they just leave it as a YouTube live stream. So for live streaming, you don't want it to just feel like people are watching something like a video. You want to make it feel engaging, to have that event feel. So a big part of that is engaging people with live chat. You can also do breakout rooms and have people kind of assigned to a breakout room so that they can chat in groups for a period of time. You can actually preload all of that. And so you hit a button, everyone goes to their room, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, hit another button, everyone comes back to the main session. You can use polls. I think polls are great, getting an assessment from the audience. Q&A, giving people an option to actually engage with you and ask questions, is great. Giveaways keep people glued to the screen, highly recommend it. And then also consider shout out thank yous to not just partners and sponsors, but also thinking through, if you're getting a lot of donations live, saying like, hey, John, thanks for making a donation, that will automatically kind of get your participants excited, because if they donate now, they might get acknowledged publicly. So here's just an example of a live chat on one of the CauseVox pages. This is actually the Vimeo chat, which allows you to actually embed it on whatever page you want. Thought that was really interesting. So lots of different platforms to choose from. I won't have time to go into all of them, but end of day, I recommend Zoom, actually. So what we're using right now for our webinar today, allows you to do pre-recorded content and live content. You can simulcast to YouTube and Facebook Live. You can have those breakout rooms. There's discounted pricing actually on TechSoup for nonprofits, so check that out. There's a lot of other great ones, but I think that Zoom is typically great. You can also do Vimeo with the embeddable chat is kind of interesting. Restream, which is kind of new to me. I don't have a lot of firsthand experience, but that's actually what the Autism Society of Minnesota did for their Brunch at Home campaign, which was great for simulcasting and made a really seamless switch from live to pre-recorded content. So that's what they recommended. So figured I'd shout that out as well. So yeah,
I just wanted to add a
fundraising.
little note onto what you were sharing, Candace, about kind of your bandwidth. So this is something that I've seen a lot, is that your nonprofit has a plan where you pay for a certain number of users, and that, maybe up to 100 to 300, 1,000, depending on your platform and so forth. And it's great to keep in mind that if you're going to do this option with simulcasting, as you mentioned, that it's a way to deal with overflow. So if people register for your live event and they're not able to get in because you have more people than your plan allows, by simultaneously casting or live streaming on Facebook or on YouTube or any of these other platforms, it's a way to then reach a larger audience without having to increase your plan. And it's also great to keep in mind that most of the time, it's on average about a third of your audience will actually come, compared to those that sign up. But that's if the event is free. So that's a pretty kind of standard industry-wide number. And so if you're worried about making sure that 100 people can be in your platform, it's fine to have, or if your limitation is 100 people in terms of what you can include with your plan, you can probably sign up 300 people and then set up some live streaming just in case on a social media network, in case it's a little bit off in terms of making sure that people can participate.
Yeah, I think like that overflow idea is really great. Um, yeah, and I mean, it might not be too bad. Like the discounted pricing on TechSoup is pretty good. So even if you had to like upgrade, you could always consider that. So just something to kind of look into if you're interested. Yeah, so you want to think about, fundraising through your live stream as well. So, of course, like you want to have your fundraising kind of up and running ahead of time leading up to your live stream. So including that in those marketing emails that you're sending, basically about your live stream event. So register here, donate here, kind of thing. And also considering customized giving levels for your live stream asks. So what do you want people to actually give? And saying like, hey, give $50 here, just something tangible does typically help. Making consistent call to actions throughout your live stream. So most often I see, 3 to 4 calls to action. So one at the beginning, one at the middle, one at the end to donate. So because people are popping on and off all the time. So just kind of considering that. So just schedule in a couple of calls to action. So you're directing people where they can actually donate as well. What I think is great is if you share your screen with fundraising progress updates, like I showed you some of the screenshots from those campaigns, you can say like, hey, we've raised $10,000 in the last 10 minutes. Like, let's see if we can get to 20 in the next 20 minutes, just kind of like keeping that excitement going so that people can actually see your progress live. Also including links in the live chat of where they can actually go to donate. Sending a follow-up email with the link to donate afterwards if they didn't get to live is always great as well. And then including that link wherever you're hosting it for replays. So Summit Dogs had people watch their live stream right on the page itself and donate here, but they also included the link in their YouTube live stream and including that like even afterwards, just like in the description of the video. So people always know where they can go to donate. We have some additional live streaming resources for you. I can put those in the chat at the end. So if you want to learn more about live streaming, I have this how to run the perfect webinar for your nonprofit there's lots of, tips from there. And we also have an article about 4 live streaming best practices and 7 real live stream examples. A lot of those are virtual events. So you can kind of take a look at some live examples. So ultimately, I know I said we were spending the majority of our time really going through, thinking through your virtual event structure and how that's going to, and your goals alongside of that. So here's just kind of a quick list of everything that we just talked through. So yeah, kind of recapping here for your virtual event structure. So we also have this virtual event planning template. So it's the Google Sheet you can download and actually start plugging in all of those things once you have your structure in mind. And that can really help keep you on task to really execute this virtual event well. So I'll include that in the chat as well in just a moment. So I know we're running up on time. I want to be really careful of that. So I'm going to probably skip over a few things. There's a few things. So we talked about live streaming. Other things to keep in mind is actually how you're going to fundraise and the platform that you're going to use to do that. So Autism Society of Minnesota, they had this whole page built out where people could sign up and donate or become a peer-to-peer and watch live and all of that, share across different channels. But whatever you use, just make sure that it is mobile optimized. So we see that about 65% of traffic is mobile. And then also 54% of consumers have used a mobile wallet to make a payment. So Apple Pay, Google Pay. I think this is actually only increasing right now. So thinking through mobile giving and using those mobile wallet options. If you're having people sign up to fundraise, think through like, hey, they might be doing that on their phone. So whatever you're using, just make sure that it's kind of designed to be mobile friendly. And just keep in mind, a lot of people might be watching and engaging or donating right on their phone. So I have just like a checklist item for you for when you're looking for a platform to use. And of course, all of this corresponds with, your particular virtual event and what your needs look like. But these are a lot of the tips that I recommend is just making it sure it's easy for you to set up. It's all mobile optimized. It's easy to donate. If you're doing peer-to-peer, of course, you want that capability. Opportunity to brand it. I actually think branding is really important for virtual events because it's how you make your page feel like your in-person event. You can do a lot with just the branding on a page to kind of give people that event feel. If you're doing tickets, of course, you want that. And then, of course, incorporating live streaming as well if you're using a platform. So here's just Miles for Mojave Desert Land Trust. They have this peer-to-peer as like one of the main components for their hikeathon. So people could set how many miles hiked, and then you could see how much funds were raised, and people could all kind of come here and create their own page to participate really easily. Another thing to keep in mind is you do want to communicate impact as much as possible. So, for example, on the donation form itself of thinking through ways that you can show how each donation is actually going to make an impact. So your donors are choosing a dollar amount based on the impact they want to create and not just, arbitrary dollar amount. So this is from Skid Row Housing Trust. I thought they did a great job of kind of showing what $75 can accomplish for their organization. So here's a quick checklist. So when you're building out your fundraising site, just to keep in mind that you're going to need some inputs. So fundraising appeals, so writing out the content on your page, your logo and branding colors, all of your goals and end dates and timelines, and making sure that you have some content handy, basically to get this page up and running. So you can always come back to this and as a quick checklist when you're setting up your page. Also, just think through whatever platform you use, or if you are just driving donations through your site, just make sure that data reconciliation is easy for you, because the last thing you want to do is after your virtual event, you can't get the data you need. It's such a accounting nightmare. So just kind of think through that ahead of time. It's great if you have use a software that integrates with, some of the other software you might be using. For example, CauseVox integrates with Zapier, which can automatically push data to Boomerang, Kindful, QuickBooks, Salesforce, Little Green Light, MailChimp, Constant Contact. So all that data can be pushed automatically, but just kind of think through, what you can do on your end to make reporting easy. And then thinking through if you're going to have an event landing page on your website. So Nicholas House made this great landing page for their virtual event. And so they had, all the progress towards their goal there. They had donate, watch, attend, these great call to actions right on the page. People could easily just make a donation. They can opt to become a dream builder, which I think meant give a monthly gift. They could then opt to start a peer-to-peer fundraiser if they wanted to participate in that way. They could register for their different, panels for their virtual event. And then they also had all like the thank yous to the sponsors and the links back to their pages and the FAQ. So great example of a landing page. And all of this, you can also still incorporate aspects of, even if you are using a fundraising platform, just embedding a lot of these elements on the page itself to really streamline things. So at that, we talked about peer-to-peer actually enough. I feel pretty confident that it's a strong strategy for you to think through if you are doing a virtual event. There's a lot of people who are basically whoever is closest to your organization, they're all probably going to be great peer-to-peer fundraisers for you. So board staff, volunteers, anyone who typically attends or buys a table if you are doing a virtual gala, all great people to engage. You do want to give them some time to set up and do some personalized outreach. And one of my recommendations is to create a toolkit. So some of the Systems Dogs did this whole virtual table captain packet, which really explained what they were asking everyone to do, and also gave them all of the pre-written tools to do it. So they had some pre-written emails laid out. The Walk the State Challenge actually made like a whole sample promotional calendar to keep their participants basically fundraising and have that schedule in mind of how often and where they should be posting in order to drive donations. So some tips to just kind of keep people on track is just to have maybe like a weekly email throughout the fundraiser to your peer-to-peer participants and just make sure that they're on track to meet their goals. There's also some other ways, but I also think prizes and giveaways are always nice as well to really help people feel motivated. You also can recognize, that public recognition on social media is also a really nice way to just sort of show your participants your appreciation. And so Autism Society, they did this great giveaway where every $50 donated through a peer-to-peer page earned them a drawing ticket. So it incentivized them to raise more. But also it wasn't like everyone was getting a prize, just, they were giving away this big prize at the end of it. So it really did incentivize people to raise a little bit more through their own pages. So let's just go over the last few tips here, and then I can take some time to go over your questions. So just a few tips is to drive everyone to participate in one place if possible. The more you can streamline where everyone goes to donate, watch, sign up, do peer-to-peer fundraising if that's part of it. The more that's all in one place, the easier it's going to be to drive people there. So it's less confusing. Everyone just keeps going to the same link to watch and register and all of that. So that can streamline things. Definitely embrace multi-channel marketing. So you're going to want to think through, all the different channels that you can promote this on, email, social media, your website, and all of other digital channels as well. You might even want to do some digital ads to see, if you can get more people signed up. Easy donations are a must. That's pretty much a given. offering incentives is a great approach. And then getting a match does tend to actually drive up donations about 50%. So if you are able to get a match from a partner or your board or whoever, that really can, just increase donations throughout the whole fundraiser. And yeah, consider a hybrid approach later this year, even if you are doing in person. Virtual events are still key for, those who can't attend live and in person. So definitely keep virtual events top of mind, even when you're able to do in-person events again. Because even a lot of people are still going to want to attend virtually, or they're halfway across the world and couldn't attend virtually. So I think it's such a great component. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to chat with you about powering up your virtual fundraising with CauseVox if you're interested. I also have, whether or not you want to actually talk about CauseVox, I'd also be happy to chat with you in general about your virtual fundraising event. I talk about virtual fundraising events, I feel like all day, every day. So I can, happy to hear more about your event idea and give you some feedback, some suggestions. There's event ticketing that we just launched that we're so excited about. And now, so one of the things that I do want to point you towards is that we have our blog post, which is our 30 or 23 virtual fundraising ideas. Great place to get some inspiration, but there's also the download available on that page where you can access the virtual fundraising event planning calendar and template. So you can go there. I just pasted that in the chat. And questions. I sped through the end there, but hopefully wasn't too bad.
I see one so far. We have someone asking if there's going to be a webinar specifically about the ticketing platform that CauseVox is now offering. Or, I imagine you guys are doing a demo and probably that's available on your website.
Yeah, so we actually have, and I can paste the link there too. So we're doing that webinar on Friday. So we're walking through our ticketing, and also we added a whole bunch of features and kind of changed our backend a little bit. So we're kind of doing both in one go. So if you're interested, you can register there and attend on Friday.
And then is that blog link that you shared, Candace, is that the space where people can go to find the fundraising template that you referenced?
Yeah. So the template is the template, and the blog post is on the blog post. So I kind of navigated away from it, but it is our virtual fundraising ideas blog post, and I'll add that back in the chat.
Awesome. That was for Robin there, if she's still with us. And then I'm looking here a little bit through the questions and also seeing one person was asking about assistance with planning virtual events. That's not something that we do at Elevation. Certainly if you're a CauseVox customer, I know that you guys would help any nonprofit that's working with your platform to plan an event. So hopefully that helps Michelle with your question. I think Michelle, you were also asking about pricing. That's something you can also find on the CauseVox website, I imagine, or reach out to Candace directly.
Yeah, feel free to shoot me an email, and I'd love to chat with you as well, because we have some different pricing, and usually it's best if we just kind of hear what you're thinking and I can make a suggestion for which plan. And so, yeah, for anyone that has more in-depth questions like that, I'd definitely book a time to chat with me or shoot me an email.
All right, fantastic. And it looks like those are all the questions I'm seeing now. So thank you everyone for staying on with us a few extra minutes for the rest of the presentation, and for having joined us today. And we hope that it was enormously helpful, and we will be following up in the next few days with the resources mentioned in this webinar.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. I had such a great time going through all these tips. I know it was quite a lot to absorb. So